Hey everyone, Genome here. It's been a little while since my last video, so I figured I better put out something, seeing as it's been so long. Today's video is going to be a lot different than what you're probably currently seeing in the Strike Force community. There's a lot of faux outrage going on right now, and lots of advice for the future, and that stuff is pretty important, of course, especially for, you know, the newly created account and all, to know where to build, which direction to go. My channel is really more focused on value itself and what you already have, and then, you know, doing some wise planning for the future in the short and midterm. Some of that long, far away stuff, you know, it's a little beyond the purview of those who just started. So, yes, it's good to plan long, but, you know, the short game has to be applied somewhat too. And this video is going to have to do a little bit with that, but it's going to be more around the lines of T4s and what you should spend them on, and more specifically on the most malign, like, thing that you can spend your hard-earned T4s on, and that's none other than the basic attack. That's right. People almost never talk about the basic attacks in this game, and there's quite a few good ones. Now, a lot of characters are so powerful you may never even see their basic attack go off in most fights, right? So you might not even know what they do. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you what I consider anyway are the top 10 basics in this game right now, and I'll go ahead and throw some honorable mentions in there too. This is not necessarily saying you have to put T4s in all of these, of course, but I don't think you'd be totally, like, I don't know, not amiss, but saddened by actually putting T4s toward this stuff. You know, 180 is 180, but still, it's the cheapest one to upgrade, really, and there are some characters on this list where you'd be using the basic very often, and in some cases more often than any of the other skills. So let's go ahead and get into real fast the honorable mentions I want to bring up, and each one of these could have been on the list, to be honest with you, but they either had some requirement to be had, or they're just not quite on the level of the top 10 in my mind. So in no particular order, the Black Widow and Yelena, let's go ahead and pull those up. We'll just pull up Yelena or whatever. But basically, both of these characters, if they meet certain criteria, have extremely strong basic, and they can tie in with each other with assists and all that too. Basically, stripping positive effects and giving it to themselves. It's very strong effects, one of the strongest effects in this game, actually. The only thing is, she doesn't really do this like off of her team. Same with Black Widow. Black Widow does this actually a little easier. She doesn't need the skill of her team to do it, so I'd say hers might be a little more stronger. But and hers is just clearing all effects, which is really strong. Very, very powerful when they meet certain criteria. So, but you're not always going to be on these teams or in the game modes that they're wanting you to be in or whatever. So I couldn't say they're the top 10, but they're really, really strong. Another one that pairs up very nicely together is actually Corvus and Proxima. I'm going to go ahead and just leave their basics the same. They're both basically the same thing. A lot of people put T4s into these pairs because they always will assist each other when they're maxed, right? So when each one of these characters is just, I'll tell you assists, but their main attack, the main attacker, strips or pulls two positive effects off. Doesn't pull it, just clears two positive effects off the target, and it just does piercing damage. The other character who will always assist will pull one additional positive effect off there and do the damage too. So every time these two basic, they're just strip. They can like decimate the buffs on a heavily buffed character as long as they don't have a high resistance, right? So very, very powerful, especially when they're paired together. But even just as a regular basic, it's pretty strong. Whenever you can clear buffs, that's like the third best thing you can do with a buff character, other than like stealing or flipping. Flipping probably the strongest, but so very, very powerful those two are. Another mutant I'm going to talk about is Toad. I actually wanted to put him on the top 10 as far as basics goes because his basic is so good, and you're going to be seeing this all the time because he assists like crazy, all right? All right, so when you get to the down and dirty on him, it's when you max him, he's at 260% damage, and he applies offense down for 1 turn and slow for 2 turns. Very, very strong moves. Like if they don't resist it or something like that, very, very strong. And he's going to be putting a lot of these debuffs down on assists, and he's just like crazy once again on Brotherhood. You'll see that a lot. So exceptionally strong basic. I definitely wouldn't feel bad about tier 4ing this one if I would use Bloodhood more outside of War and RTA. Another one I want to talk about is Venom. Venom used to have one of the most unique and one of the most powerful basics in the game, and it's still very good, especially in raids, and I'll tell you why. That's Maul. His basic attack, when fully leveled, is going to do 230% damage, and it's going to apply bleed for 1 turn. That's nothing, and his damage is really weak, right? That's not why this attack is so good. There's actually 2 more reasons why it's really good. First off, you flip 2 positive effects and negative effects. This is probably the strongest effect that you can do to a buff character, right, on basic, is the flip. So if they had defense up, all of a sudden they have a bleed, or defense down, you know what I mean? Depends what other stuff they had on them. If they had regen on them, guess what? They got a bleed on them now. So very, very strong stuff. Very, very deceptively strong basic. And it's further made good by this attack cannot be dodged. So I love using his attack on dodgy characters in raids, specifically the Visions, the Spider-Mans that are out there that are just dodged like crazy, and Ant-Man, who's usually grabbing some of your buffs, right? It's good to flip those right back while always guaranteed to hit him. Excellent ability. And guess what? They have evade on them. This is going to switch over to a slow, I believe, so it's always going to hit. Great, great basic. The only part that's bad about it is his damage. It's not good, but that's just the nature of the beast for controllers, right? And finally, for my last, just a lot of honorable mentions, right? This is one of the very first T4s I ever did, and that was Visions. It's his best attack as his basic. You can read everything here, but up to 260% damage and 220% damage to the chained targets, up to 2, it's a very strong thing, and it applies defense down to every target it hits, which is really strong. That used to be a huge deal back in the day, right? But has the added perk of applying bleed to every tech enemy.
Me fail English? That's impossible.
And so it's free. It's just a free extra bleed against certain enemies. Very strong, and this used to be so good in clutch situations. Like, if you're expecting a Crossbones ult to come at you, this is a great thing to hit him with. If you can't ability block them, stun them, whatever, this is like the next best thing. It takes a lot of the bite out of some of those big AoE attacks or single target nukes. Very, very strong, and it would probably be at least in the top 10 in this list if Vision was just a stronger character in meta, but it just doesn't really get used for anything anymore. But that's not to say this is a bad thing. I sure wouldn't recommend T4ing it anymore because of his use, but I mean it's a very, very strong basic. So let's go ahead right now and get into what I consider the top 10 basic attacks are in Marvel Strike Force in descending order. So actually, that's more like ascending order. I think you know what I meant. Beast is awesome as a character. You won't always be seeing his basic in a lot of fights because a lot of times you'll be either opening with a special or maybe even first round if you're being strategic and you don't need it, you'll skip that and go with his basic, and then usually on the second second turn you'll be throwing out his ultimate. So this is a great filler kind of ability because you can weave it in anywhere. It's not just a regular basic. It does really good things. It flips positive effects on up to 3 characters. So very strong. And if you do this on an assist, of course, as it says here in the text, that it'll actually be 2. So it's actually a deceptively strong ability. I mean, it doesn't really do any damage. But anytime you can flip a buff, that makes it a really good filler move, usually. So, Beast is a highly strategic character, and learning when to use his basic is also very important. Alright, for my number 9 choice is going to be Ultron's Disintegration Beam. Ultron has definitely fallen out of favor in the meta. He has been falling for quite some time, but that doesn't change the fact that his basic is extremely strong, and it was one of the first, outside of Black Widow's, basics that really punished other teams with buffs, right? If they had buffs on them, guess what? They're your buffs now. And as fast as Ultron gets later on when bots start rolling, it's a devastating move. Really, I think the biggest boon, though, for this move was removing taunts. He would strip taunts off stuff. Now, he doesn't put the taunt on himself. It says it even in the text right there. They're very careful with that. Extremely strong at its time, and it's still pretty good. You can pull those, and it makes it a selective target too. You can pull those defense ups and stuff off of other characters and make him a bit more survivable. So Excellent thing. Anytime you steal buffs and put them on yourself, that's extremely strong. It's like the second most powerful thing you do, arguably the first, with a basic attack or really any kind of buff manipulation. So excellent attack, and you'll be using this attack actually quite a bit more than you think, in between summoning more of your bot army and depending if they're rolling or not, and getting Disintegration being up. Because there's a very long cooldown, so if all your little bots are dead, your bot armies are dead, you can be resulting a lot to the basic attack. Luckily, it's a really good one. So, especially when you, throw Striker on him, and and he's pulling even more stuff off there. He double taps. It's crazy with skirmishers and vulnerables out there. So, excellent stuff. So he's my number 9 pick for best basic in the game. All right, for my number 8 pick, I'm going with Black Bolt's Royal Strike. As far as overall use, this is probably my second most used basic in the game, but and it gets on this list just for the pure power of it. As far as what it does, it's strong, but not really top tier anymore like it used to be. But the fact that it's attached to an offensive juggernaut like Black Bolt makes it extremely good. Flipping negative effects on yourself, which, that's only if they have slow. It's very conditional. I don't even count that into the ranking. But it's the fact that you clear 2 positive effects off of other characters. This comes in so handy against things like tanks. You see tons and tons of Drax in raids, right? So this is a great way to peel taunt off them. And this does big damage, so you really don't feel too bad about using this a lot. And you're going to use this a lot unless you're using it with Thanos and some other things I've talked about before, right? So you can be using his basic a lot. I like to save his special for more specialized things, like an absolutely has to die nuke sometimes, or if you're going after dodgy characters with it. So you'll find yourself using this basic a lot unless you're getting a lot of energy thrown at you. So it's a great high damaging move from a great character. So that is my number 8 pick. All right, for my number 7 pick, I'm going with a character I don't even have unlocked yet, and that is Dr. Doom's basic. No one really talks about this because you're not always going to see it. And, everyone wants to talk about the ultimate then special, and he just nukes everybody. Well, you're not always going to have that, right? So, hey, if your ability blocked, you got to do something constructive. Well, this is a very constructive basic. If you're charged, even better. But basically, you can be hitting the main or the one target for 360% damage when you're completely maxed, and it applies disrupted every time. Amazing move. Also, if you have a charge on you actually flip 2 of their buffs, but you can't always count on that. There's charge manipulation going on. But whatever the case may be, just the fact that you can apply disrupted anytime you want, which is a very potent debuff. It's an amazing one. So he does pretty high damage anyway, so just on the fact that you can apply disrupted alone makes this really good. Ultimus' attack, if it was like 50%, that would have made the list because that thing is so strong. So disrupted's very powerful, and Doom itself hits pretty hard. So yep, he's gonna be my number 7 pick for best basic in the game. Alright, for my number 6 pick, I'm going with Carnage. Carnage's basic cleave is something you're going to be using constantly on the symbiotes. You're going to use his basic way more than basically any other character's basic, and for good reason, because it's basically his best move. Yes, most people usually open with his ultimate. That's usually the way to go, but a lot of times you don't want to use his special, which is on a pretty low cooldown, because you don't want to peel the debuffs on it. But Carnage spreads them around with this basic, so yeah, him hitting 1 or 2 adjacent targets if you hit a debuff character first and it chains around, what more do you want? It's not the biggest damaging. Well, he's not the biggest damaging character in the world, but he keeps the train rolling, man. He keeps spreading those debuffs around, and when Venom's ultimate's on cooldown, this is one of the easiest ways to do it. So if you got defense up or down on a character that's pretty important over here, and you want to spread it to his neighbor, just use his attack, and the neighbor's probably going to get it unless there's a dodge, right? So great attack. You're going to be using this basic probably the second most, if not first most, of all the basics that you're seeing on this list here, because it's just that good and it fits the character that well. So that is my number 6 pick, Carnage's Cleave. For my number 5 pick, I'm going to go with a character you don't hear a lot about nowadays, outside of war, of course, and that's none other than Taskmaster. He has probably the most simple of all the basics on this list, but it's also incredibly potent. And if his other moves weren't so good, you'd probably see it all the time. And that is Imitating Strike. Imitating Strike is basic as he gets. You wind up doing 300% damage when it's maxed, and you steal 3 positive effects. Brutally strong. If he can beat the focus check, this is just decimates an enemy character. Very strong. And I can't remember if this does stuff on assist. I think it does. I think it steals the effects too. I can't remember if it's 3 or 1 though. But whatever the case may be, this is just an exceptionally strong thing, because a lot of times people will try to ability block Taskmaster out of it. So at least if you're getting stuck using this ability, you're probably going to do something really good with it. It's just a super potent thing to steal 3 positive effects off an enemy. Very strong, very basic, and very good. And that's what makes it my number 5 pick for best basic in Marvel Strike Force. Alright, for my number 4 pick, I'm going with Anti-Venom's Deathclaw. This basic, a lot like Carnage's, just does everything that you want the symbiotes to do, right? So by the time you get this maxed out, this can be hitting for 250% damage, and it's going to apply bleed and the opposite of 2 negative or positive effects that you have on you. So like say you have regen and speed up, you're going to put slow and bleed on them, right? That's a really cool basic. And when he gets done with it, the gravy on this is when it's maxed, if he does his attack, he also heals the most injured character for 10% of his total max health. So, and clears hero block, which is like the bane of the symbiotes team. So it's an exceptionally strong basic, and a lot of times you're not going to want to use his special, right? Because maybe there's nothing to revive, you want to save it for just in case, and his ultimate's on a fairly long cooldown, so you're going to be using his basic quite a bit, and luckily it's a good one. Now his damage is pretty low, but that's to be expected for like a support type character, but still, I think it's like, it just fits the team so well, and it's too bad more basics aren't like this in the game for some of the less sustainable teams. So my number 4 pick is Anti-Venom's Deathclaw. Alright, so now we're in the top 3, and you know that these 3 had to be, or at least the ones above it, had to be exceptionally potent if Silver Surfer's is the 3rd. I'm actually going to go with making his the 3rd strongest in Marvel Strike Force right now. And here's my logic. And now as far as raw power, this is probably tops when you couple this with the fact that he gains so much speed bar as the fight goes on. It just does more and more and more damage, and basically while this is hitting you, you're not going to keep anything on you as far as positive effects. So basically you attack primary target for 280% piercing. That's huge. That's a lot of piercing damage. Silver Surfer does a lot of damage anyway, and if you happen to have any negative effects on you, guess what? They go on the primary target. That's nice. So, but if you didn't have it, which you often don't, because he usually starts with defense up and all that, you're going to take all of those positive effects of the primary target, all of them, and put them on yourself. Oh my gosh, this thing is a monster, and this is like one-on-one, he's almost impossible to kill, right? Without a huge one-time nuke. So it actually hurts you to have lots of buffs on yourself when you're facing this guy. Very strong, gets stronger and stronger as the fight goes on. This would probably be higher on the list, except for that his special and his ultimate are also so strong. Those are almost always the 1 and 2 opener, and so usually you just wait until later in the game to use this. But it's highly effective. Man, is it strong. It's not what I would say is his defining thing though, like maybe the top 2 here are. But it's really good, it's really strong. The Silver Surfer is, of course, broken as heck. So that's my pick for number 3 most potent basic attack in the game, and that's Silver Surfer's Cosmic Crackle. Alright, so not many surprises here on how high Kestra will be on this list, because all of her abilities are absolutely insane. I'll be upgrading these just a little bit later down the road, just waiting. But let's talk about her basic, and her basic is a monster, just like she is. So when you got this thing maxed out, you'll be attacking the primary target for 370% damage, which is enormous. You apply defense down for 2 turns, and then you change to another target and do the same thing to them. Oh man, is this potent. And what makes it even more so is this plays in perfectly to her skill set. This is why her basic a lot of time is, it's like so undervalued in some ways, because it does everything that needs to be done to make her even more lethal. Defense down. Anytime she's putting defense down on another character, that means she's going to start pinging them when somebody else attacks them and does huge damage with her passive. But even without that, this is an extremely strong attack because the damage is 370%. And she's already a big damage dealer. Huge damage. This is great in a 1-on-2 situation. You're going to take them both out at the same time. It's crazy how good this is. But the fact that it leaves defense down for 2 turns, it just leaves the door open for other characters to go ham. It means you're not relegated to only using characters like Shatterstar to apply defense down to everybody. You know, she can set herself up for victory. Basically, all of her moves leave defense down behind. But a lot of times I'll open, especially in RTA, I almost always open with her special. Not usually her opening ultimate, sometimes just depending on the matchup. So in a environment where you don't want to use your ultimate until it's a key time, this is a great filler, and it's not even just a filler basic. This thing just hits like a truck, so it's an amazing ability. It completely fits her motif, and it's my pick for number 2 best basic in Marvel Strike Force. Well, alright, I don't know if by process of elimination y'all figured this out yet, but I believe the best, most useful, and dare I say the most character-defining basic in this game is Symbiote Slinger of Symbiote Spider-Man. This thing, you're going to be using this like Carnage's Cleave. You're going to almost always be using this. It's so rare, for me at least, to be using his special. And you're usually saving his Web Slam, his ultimate, for a clutch stun, right? So it's a lot of times just sitting there. You're going to be getting a lot of energy with this team because they move so fast. They get so much turn bar, right? They get lots of turns. But you're going to find yourself using this so much, and it's so bloody effective. So what's it do? It doesn't sound like too much until you really start using it in practice. Attack primary target for 210% damage and apply defense down for 2 turns. Rebound chain to 2 adjacent targets for 110% damage. Apply defense down for 2 turns. This attack cannot be countered. Very good ability. You don't see too many attacks like that because a lot of times it'll break that chain if you do get countered. This one it completely ignores that. It's great for when you don't want to take retaliatory damage. This thing it's one of the most, maybe the most strategic basic in the game too. Especially when you have 2 characters that are side by side. You gotta look at their health bars very closely. Don't just get into the mindset of just, keep bashing on the same main character. If one character's in green and the other one's in yellow over there, it probably behooves you to hit the green one first. And then when he hits that yellow one, it'll probably go into the red, and that'll actually start Carnage going and whatever. Or if you're running on Black Bolt or something like that, or Kestrel, she'll ping. But you really got to think about it, and then he'll bounce back to the green. Sometimes he'll go down 3 or whatever. It's kind of random a little bit, but it's very controllable in a way. But the fact that it leaves defense down behind, and it hits like up to 3 characters with defense down for 2 turns, extraordinarily strong. The damage actually winds up being pretty good, especially over time because of those defense downs, and that lets also Carnage come in and spread it to yet another character. So basically, it's very easy to have like 4 of the 5 enemies, or however many's on screen, have defense down within your first turn or 2. So very strong. It's character defining for him because you can use this so much. This is the attack you're probably going to use 90% of the time with him. It's just a great one. And don't forget the fact that while he's doing that, he's healing himself too. So it's a win-win for everybody. Defense down is probably the best thing you can do against enemy teams as far as at least rating goes, because they're not smart enough to cleanse things always or whatever. So extraordinarily strong basic on a great character, and it's my pick for number 1 best basic in Marvel Strike Force. So there's my list. I'm sure there's a lot of people be disagreeing with some of these picks. I kind of just hearted all of the ones I think had the best. There's lots of other ones out there too. Characters like Strife, if you can actually get his basic to go off or find time for it, it puts like every positive effect off the guy he hits onto Mr. Sinister. Very strong. I mean, there's tons of characters you can go into. You can't make room for them all, but there's lots of good ones out there. And yeah, so what say you? What is, in your mind, the top 10 best basics in the game? Do you think my list is okay? Did I bring up some things maybe you hadn't thought about before? Or do you think it's total garbage? Whatever the case may be, like I said, let me know in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. So hopefully this was a little bit helpful to some people, and at least a little bit enjoyable. And till the next long pause for my next video, this is Genome, out.